We're now on to our ninth talk, and we're staying with Gregory of Nazianzus for a second look at some of his teaching, which can be found in the same book as I read from just earlier, which is following on from his 5 orations. You may remember that he never became fully the Archbishop of Constantinople. There was a dispute with other bishops and he left. He went home, and by and large he wrote up his orations and other works in the remaining years of his life. But there was one more area of dispute that he entered into which had become significant in these final years of his life. And it's typical really of the early church that just as you're beginning to make progress in one area of theology and doctrine, another area comes to the fore. And so it was here. A new person, a new name arose, and his name was Apollinarius. And Apollinarius was putting forward an extreme view about the nature of Jesus, almost to compensate for Arianism. Arianism, you remember, said that Jesus cannot be fully consubstantial with the Father, sharing the same substance. And what the Apollinarians were saying, Apollinarius himself was saying, is that Jesus' human side to his life was, if you like, compensated for by having a divine mind. That is to say, he was not fully man and fully God. He was fully God, of the same substance with the Father and man, but rather than having a human mind, he had a divine mind, excluding, if you like, the humanity of Jesus' mind by doing this. And now this new controversy was coming in around about 370 or those sort of times, and he was answering questions being put to him by a presbyter called Cledonius. In an important section in the first letter, and there were 2 letters written to Cledonius the presbyter, Gregory argues this. He says, "For we do not part the human being from the Godhead. No, we affirm and teach one and the same God and Son. At first, not man, but alone and pre-eternal, pre-existence, unmixed with body, and all that belongs to the body. But finally," and here we have the incarnation, "human too, assumed our salvation, for the same passible in flesh and impassible in Godhead, bounded in the body, boundless in spirit, earthly and heavenly, visible and known spiritually, finite and infinite, so that by the same whole man and God, the whole human being fallen under sin might be fashioned anew." Well, I don't know if you followed all of that, but it's a highly condensed piece of theology, and it's taken from section 4 of the first letter to Cledonius, and if you get hold of the text, you can read it for himself. What he's doing here is anticipating the controversy that will come in the 5th century about what we call Christology. How is Jesus both man and both God? And what he's saying here is that he is, that he was incarnate, the divine Logos taking on human flesh and becoming fully man and fully God. And he goes on to say that this was absolutely essential for our salvation. And in this way, you see, as you understand also the teachings of the great Athanasius from down the road at Alexandria, this was precisely his argument. It was because God came in human flesh that he would be able, therefore, to save us and to give us the salvation we need, taking upon himself our failures and giving to us his adopted position as children of God and enjoying what Athanasius called theosis, becoming God. So Gregory goes on to say that Holy Mary is the Mother of God as in her womb. He was formed divinely and humanly. Divinely, because without a husband. Humanly, because by law of conception. Two natures there are, but not two sons or two gods. Nor was Jesus adopted divine following his baptism or resurrection. And still Jesus remains in the flesh. And here is the sort of critical statement which has been taken out of these letters and used so often following what he wrote here. Nazianzus says this: "Where is his body now, if not with the one who assumed it? Whoever says his flesh descended from heaven but had no source among us is anathema." He goes on to say, the unassumed, that which God has not assumed into himself, is the unhealed. But what is united with God is also being saved. This is the crux of what he's saying. In order to save, he must assume that life that he is saving. And to say that he did not have a fully human mind is to say that he was not fully human. And that is what Apollinarianism was trying to say. So Gregory attacks Apollinarius in these two letters and says that he is reverting to Judaism. He has faulty teaching on the Trinity. And he says great Spirit, a greater Son, and the greatest Father is what Apollinarius is saying. On the other hand, Gregory is saying that they are all of the same substance, all of the same status. They are one and the same nature. So these two letters are important to study as they take us forward into that controversy we find in the 5th century, which is about Christology, and it shows that Nazianzus was sensitive to the issues of his day and was able to put it across in such a way, in memorable words, as to be a guide to the church in the future. Now the second part of what I'm saying now is simply a quick look at his will, that is the will of Nazianzus. And this is interesting insofar as it shows something, again, of the idea of social justice that was running through the Cappadonians and their work. And he must be one of the only church fathers where we can read a copy of his will, how he left his money to people. And it's no surprise, as he was a monk, that he left his money almost entirely to the church at Nazianzus, and also he made a number of legacies to other people who were either in his families like nieces or other presbyters as well. And so he left the earth, as it were, having distributed everything either to the poor or to these members of his family. And in this way, once again, he shows, like the other Cappadocian Fathers, a desire to help those who are not well off, and indeed to give funds for the church and for its mission in Nazianzus, to which he was so committed. So that's the second of our two studies on the works of Gregory Nazianzus, his letters to Clodonius and his will. Thank you.